I'm going to be linking generosity, which is a topic we've been discussing, with care. And we started this a little bit yesterday with the Buddha's last words being tread the path with care. And I'm looking at that care as being generous and just going to explore a few ways that I've been seeing that. So in the meditation sitting after our group yesterday, or during our group yesterday, I remembered when I was teaching a retreat in New Zealand. And it must have been about 2018. And when the retreat ended, I was feeling really happy and contented, and like I had done the best job that I could with the circumstances. And it was this really nice internal feeling. And a few of us were going to meet up for lunch afterwards. And I remember being asked, "Where do you want to go to eat?" And I said, "Oh, anywhere is fine." And the anywhere is fine seemed really true in that moment. I felt really flexible and open. And when I was looking at it in the meditation, I could see that I was coming from a type of generosity for others and wanting their preferences and their needs to get met. And it didn't seem important to me at the time. But here's the thing. When I got to that restaurant, it was really important to me. I started looking over the menu. I couldn't find anything I liked. And then I couldn't find things I could eat because I have certain food allergies. And, suddenly I didn't feel so generous. And that state of equanimity had broken, and everything else became quite real. So, in reflective meditation language, the conditions changed. So, the generosity that I was able to exhibit or have changed. And in this case, that end of the retreat feeling of, really internal well being, which was almost like invincibility, like I could handle anything. It wasn't true because I couldn't. And it, it really shows how generosity is a kind of a moving target. It can't be labeled one thing and seen that way all the time. It really has to be in context. And it's very easy for us when we're starting to look at generosity to easily see ourselves as a generous person or not, and start to reflect upon situations in our life where we have been or haven't been. I mean, this is a very common, I think, with the way when we bring a topic to the foreground. Um, so I really want to look at generosity with care and with self-care, and um, back to treading the path with care. So I've been listening to a podcast where Tressie McCullum Cotton, who's a really wonderful author and activist, she is interviewing Pooja Lakshman on what she calls real self-care. And they're really trying to have a conversation about the commodification of self-care, buying a scented candle, getting a massage, just doing kind of that superficial level of self-care versus something that's deeper, that really goes into, I would consider walking the path with care. And Pooja talks about it like this. We need to be thinking about self-care as something that's threaded through every single decision in our lives, small decisions and big decisions. It's not a task to check off your list. It's actually something to embody. And that, I think, is the direction of taking up a practice and taking up a path, is that it's going to affect the little decisions, the big decisions. It's going to go into everything. I mean, nothing gets left behind, so to speak. And that self-care, I think, can transition from a kind of a superficial level into something that's more relevant and has deeper value. And And they take it to another level too. In this podcast, they talk about self-care as looking at the harder and bigger decisions. So in addition to the small ones, like what's my retirement going to look like? What what is my partner and what are my partner and I going through? Um, what do I want to become? Where do I want to live? How do I want to live? Like these really important questions that often um, are circling underneath the surface. So part of this is trying to point people into the direction with self-care, and I'm even going to say with generosity, um, towards looking at your own values. And that when you can embody your own values, not the society's values or the culture's values that you live in, that you're really doing something subversive. You're going against the grain of kind of falling into, oh, I'm taking care of myself by doing dot, dot, dot. Are you really? Like, and looking into that more deeply. And I want to consider that as a type of generosity. Now, I'm not totally sold on this idea. This is my morning supposition. But that I think that giving yourself the time and intent and attention to go inward, I do feel like that's a subversive act at times. I'm so pulled out to take care of the things that are necessary or seem necessary in my family life, in the lives of people around me, that becomes the normal direction, is to do what I was doing even in the samadhi state. I'll call that a samadhi state, that end of retreat state of thinking about others and wanting their needs to be attended to, and giving that kind of unselfish motivation more precedence, and forgetting about my own self-care and what I need and what I'm able to give, and being really more realistic about that. Um, and in the sense where this at times can feel like that's taking up so much personal time, like that's putting all of our attention on ourselves and really becoming, and I can never get this word right, solipsistic. Um, I'm sorry, you guys could look it up. It begins with an S and ends with an M. um, but that kind of just intensive internal navel gazing. But I would really consider that by doing that, we're modeling something to others. That by looking inward and really looking at what's self-care, what's generous to myself and to others, that is then affecting others around us, and that becomes a collective effort. When we give ourselves permission to do that, it does give others permission to do that. And it does start to change the world. A little bit like we talked about yesterday. How do we become a more generous world? What if we lived in a more generous world? Sometimes I think, well, we're starting that right here with our group. I feel that this group embodies a certain amount of self-care and generosity that I've seen grown and develop over the years in myself and in others. So I'll end the talk this morning here. And this is